everybody. Welcome to today's show. My name is Spencer Walsh. We have a great episode of Newsflash for you today. We are starting off with a major policy announcement that Joe Biden made today, looking to possibly, probably, maybe erase his bad start on foreign policy. Well, it's not going so well on the Afghanistan front. Joe Biden has just announced a plan to withdraw all troops from Afghanistan by the auspicious date of September 11th. That was some months after Donald Trump's May 1st deadline to have all troops removed. But still some people are freaking out about forever wars and something about the United States being a sponsor of women's rights and peace and safety in Afghanistan. We'll discuss that. And a positive story, unions and the socialist left, DSA, coming together like never before to fight for one of the most significant pieces of union legislation in modern history in the PRO Act. And if Joe Biden can pass it, this story will be from David Sirota's The Daily Poster. And also I had to go to this one because of our guest today, a great clip about Sam Seaborn talking about the Progressive Caucus and having the rich pay their fair share. Just a clip that kind of ground my gears. And we'll have probably the biggest West Wing fan I know, my father, on to talk about it. He has always been, we always have a political conversation just naturally, and they're very, very good. So I thought it was like, why not have him on the podcast? So thank you so much for joining us today.
It's my pleasure.
All right, so just hold that microphone close up, and it should be good. We'll start today with this Afghanistan news here today. So pretty much, as the New York Times explains, the news is that the Biden administration plans to withdraw all U.S. troops from Afghanistan by the 20th anniversary of September 11th. And it elicited a surprisingly wide range of reactions in Washington, fitting for a conflict that has divided and befuddled the nation. So, 20 years, September 11th, the new date. Trump has kind of been promising to do this. Obama's been promising to do this. It's been hilarious and kind of like insane to watch how many times various presidents over the past few years have said, "Oh, we're going to get them out very soon," and that date has always passed. So September 11th is now the new date that has been promised. What is your reaction to this new news in the Afghanistan conflict as a whole?
I'm kind of curious what the fascination is with announcing dates. It's like no other country ever says, "Oh, we're going to get this. We're going to get our troops out of here by this date, or we're going to do this by this date." It's like if you're trying to accomplish a military objective, it seems to me to be very foolish to start setting dates. That's one thing, and then the other thing is whether we should be there in the first place, and that's a pretty long discussion, but I would think you could make a case that we should be there, and in what capacity, just because the Taliban have proven themselves very slippery characters.
I think the thing is it's very interesting because it all comes down to how much influence you want the country to have in, a desert, not to denigrate Afghanistan, thousands of miles away on the other side of the globe. Like, what interest, what influence should our country have in, for example, protecting quote unquote women's rights, as some people tried to say that we do? Is it that we're protecting women's rights, or we're exporting a bunch of their certain flour that grows in abundance in Afghanistan that we have been exporting a lot of since the Afghanistan war? Like, there's a lot of different interests there, but I think there's definitely a lot of different questions there. As for your thing about dates, I actually do remember Trump saying that. It's like I guess it's just purely for coordination, but the comical aspect of it is that the dates keep coming and going, so it just seems so much of a joke. And
but it's so pointless. You gain nothing by setting that date, having to move it, or who's out. You always leave behind 500, 1,000, 2,000.
Yeah.
So it's like there's no finite line where everybody is gone. It just, seems to drag on. So it seems like a foolish exercise, but 99% of the people who lived through 9/11, I guess, would say about Afghanistan is that we just don't want it to be another to become another haven for Al Qaeda's. And, what does that mean? I don't know. It's how do we stop that? That's how do we make sure that we don't have to go back in and refight the same war.
I think there's just broader questions as to what the war we fought actually accomplished, which was like nothing. In terms of the goals that was stated when we set out. Like, there was a lot accomplished, but not exactly in the areas that we thought.
Well, we did knock the Taliban in the nose pretty good.
But now they're coming right back. That's the thing.
I would agree.
It's part of the fact that they are part of the governing country. And, the Taliban, they're awful. They do awful things. But as long as they're not a threat to America, unless you want to internally make you want to make Afghanistan a colony of America, then you can beat back the Taliban internally.
Well,
but
you can't make the Afghanistan the Russians tried and
it's pretty hard. It doesn't work well. But there's a legitimate faction of the Republican Party, or at least the former Republican Party, most of them now supported Biden in the last election, that actually genuinely want to do that. It's kind of insane. But this recent survey carried out October 4th through 10th in 2019 among a nationally representative sample of 1,260 respondents. The 38% of Democrats favored maintaining current troop levels, along with 34% of Republicans, so pretty broadly bipartisan. 23% of Republicans and 21% Democrats favored decreasing troop levels. So that's a pretty interesting.
So if you were going to make the argument
there
to leave troops there, you would say we got to leave troops there because we got to keep an eye on the Taliban because they're such evil guys that they're going to start doing something that's going to make us have to come back there again. And I don't know what it's going to be. It's going to be either slaughtering more citizens, something, and but I think the thing most people care about is facilitating an attack on America.
Yeah, I really don't think many people care about what's going on, and a lot of people don't really know that so much American money and time and effort has been dumped into this kind of bottomless pit where so much has been lost, so much has been wasted, whether through negligence or corruption. I would say it's definitely a lot of both. And then I think the responsibility of the anti-war left, not saying they were a part of it, is to make the case of what could we do with that time.
Right. Well, after 9/11, they attacked us. We fought back. We penalized them. So I think after 9/11, we were defending ourselves. Now, if we go in again because they're bad guys, then we're the global policemen, which I think did us very badly in Iraq.
Yeah, and right. that's kind of the basic argument. Yeah, and it does seem to be that a lot of people, the consensus at least seems to be, we're getting close to it anyway, that the time has come, but it's what is the purpose that we should be in there anymore? It does, with a few exceptions, the response to the move was relatively muted, reflecting a war over time that evolved from searing front-page news to a lower-grade, if always deadly war that many Americans forgot was being waged. And that was kind of the first thing that I would argue the Obama administration was really kind of pioneered, which was how to be at war without America obsessing over it every day. So we still keep the war machine going, and it's kind of low cost, under the radar, humdrum along.
You would know what that authorization was called that they keep relying on.
Yeah, AUMF, authorization use of military force,
which is 20 years old, but they're still using it like it just came off the printer yesterday, right?
Yeah, that is the big. That's the big thing that they've always kind of used to justify it. Yes, the decision will keep more than 3,000 American troops on the ground in Afghanistan beyond the May 1st withdrawal deadline. And what really is definitely going to happen is whatever happens with the American on the ground troops, there's going to be a lot of funding of covert defense contractors and private armies on the ground that have already been there, and they were there in Iraq as well. So that's probably how they're going to find their way to continue this thing, continuing the money flow. But it is going to be good to see, I think, some troops possibly leave at the end of the day.
If no Al-Qaeda 2.0 takes root there, then I would say I 100% agree.
Yeah, I think, honestly, the way we don't get Al-Qaeda 2.0, or the way we don't inspire anti-American sentiment among radical fundamentalist groups, is to not be in that region. I think, sure, they disagree with us on, our TV shows or whatever, but if we're not in there constantly blowing stuff up, they're way, way, way less likely to, to commit a terrorist attack. But I think the broad majority of terrorist attacks and real threats now come from, well, first off, white supremacist terrorists and right-wing terrorists, but second off, terrorists who are radicalized at home, and those through the internet.
Well, whether you make the argument that we deserve some blowback from the Islamists or not, the government has to defend itself in the best way that it can, and part of that is staying ahead of potential threats.
But I would argue the way you stay ahead of potential threats is to not give people a reason to be mad at you in the first place. And if absence makes the heart grow fonder, is what I would say. And fonder is, not necessarily fond, but,
I bet you dollars to donuts that every American that's there right now would rather be back in their hometown. But I do think they're doing a yeoman's work, a large service to the country by trying to make us safer, and I'm sympathetic to the argument that maybe their being there creates the problem, but when you're dealing with bullies who are totally irrational, I feel like they'll pick on you for whatever reason.
I mean, I think the more irrational actor definitely here would be the United States, but I think what happens here is going to be very interesting to see. Is first of all, how the country responds, and the really kind of probably pretty remarkable difference in the way the Senate responds. The moderate New Hampshire Democrat Senator Jeanne Shaheen, she backed the interventions in Afghanistan and Iraq nearly 2 decades ago. She criticized President Biden, arguing that his decision could embolden the Taliban to further destabilize the country. And I mean, again, that's a tough thing. You say, oh yeah, you could try and scare people with the Taliban, but at the end of the day, that money is going to stopping someone for a time that you're not going to really be able to stop in general, because if a government has the popular support of the people, it's going to come back no matter what. And you can't really force a government in there again unless you want to make it a that's the only option. Can't.
That would be if there was some semblance of democracy. I think the Taliban has the guns, so they're taking control not by any kind of an election. They're seizing control.
But there's certain amount of support for the Taliban's ideas, as fortunate as it is.
Absolutely.
In Afghanistan, that's one part of the reason why they're able to control parts of the reason that they troll. And there's certainly an argument that those countries are probably better off being, even separate, because they're even the way their lines were drawn, the borders were drawn, they were drawn by people who weren't from that area and just kind of carved it up in arbitrary ways. So that could just be kind of a naturally self-solving problem. But I don't think
put all the Sunnis together, put all the Shiites together.
Yeah, no, a lot of that's it's the same thing with Africa. It's people they just drew pretty shapes on the continent. It was this is how we're going to divide up the country, completely ignoring various ethnic,
usually to
boundaries,
carve out the most natural resources for the appropriate country.
Yeah, it definitely looks just pretty shapes, but
right.
Yeah, it is not great to see this. And this is kind of where I really hesitated when we saw things like the media absolutely hand-wringing over Trump's decisions and spinning them out in these all kind of impossible lights, like, oh, this is the most dangerous thing. Trump is crazy for wanting to bring our troops home from this like ridiculous 20-year war where like nothing's been achieved. And then that kind of poisons the mind of the people who would be most likely predisposed to it, which would be like liberals. Do you worry about that, or what's your thought on that concept?
Well, there's two issues. One is the merits of pulling out completely, and two is how do you sell it at home? You really don't need to sell it at home, because I think at the end of the day, anybody that's going to stand up and argue against American troops coming home is going to have a tough argument, you know?
Yeah. Especially in this political climate, where so much of the war on terror culture has been waned since 20 years ago.
It's hard. I think you should definitely have. We need troops overseas because we have enemies all over the world, and where they are, how many there are, how long they stay. I think reasonable people can disagree on that.
No, I really don't. I think that the fact that we have, military bases in 800 different military bases all across the country or all across the world, like, that's not necessary. And I think part of negotiating the next stage of our life as a country, which I think has to happen at a certain point, is saying that we don't need to be the people protecting Taiwan from China or Hong Kong from China. We need to be the people who are preparing for climate change, are guaranteeing our citizens like social democratic rights and stuff like that. So that's kind of the bargain that I think, or the kind of, change, the transition that has to be broached. And there's different ways of broaching it. Like Joe Biden trying to do it, kind of in a slow way. Trump trying to do it like, we're not done yet. We're still fighting hard. And what I thought was so appealing about Bernie Sanders was, we're going to do it. We're going to go to that next step, but we're going to do it by ensuring that our people do it with dignity. Like that was the kind of whereas we transition from, the number one world beating power that had the biggest chest and the biggest military and all that stuff. And we were always just boom times forever. Like we are not in that stage anymore. I think that is part of the age of American hegemony is coming to an end. And like what happens there is going to be very interesting to see how the political system processes it.
Well, for me, I'll leave that one to the historians, but whether I do note, well, as far as I know, that of all the American bases in the world, it seems like the only one where the host country is unhappy to have it there is Cuba. All the other countries are more than happy to have the U.S. there, with the exception of, I believe, one in Japan, where there was some misbehavior by some GIs, and it sparked some demonstrations. And, I think by and large, they're pretty happy to have American troops there.
Yeah, but
be that what it is,
it's more the resource drain, though. It's not like they're actively calling. It shows how it's one of the ways like the United States has its footprint in every corner of the world, and like it's every country kind of defers to us for a long time.
I'm super sympathetic to the idea that we don't need them all.
Yeah, exactly. That's more
what
it is.
I don't think that is an exhibit of our colonialism. I think if us being in NATO, for example, and in case there's an Article 5 incident where, attack on one is an attack on all, I think NATO would be super happy that, we have an Air Force base in Incirlik, Turkey, for example. That's going to be a nexus of a lot of stuff going on. So.
Yeah, but is that a world that exists anymore? That's the thing that we're talking about. We don't have Russia as a threat. We don't have really any threat from the Middle East, I would argue. If you're talking about
Russia is not a threat, you don't think?
Not
feels like they're going to steamroll into Ukraine any day.
Not as much as when NATO was created. Like NATO, like the purpose of NATO, I would argue, is like it's getting more and more like obsolete. The countries in there have incredibly different interests. Like,
well, think Russia's gonna, it really feels like they're coming into Ukraine pretty soon. So
they kind of already did, but
yeah,
there's that.
Yeah.
But didn't they vote for it, or Crimea voted for secession?
Voted to it's a Putin election, but yes.
I mean, to a certain extent, self-determination. I don't know, like, how much you can say, but is there, like, actual evidence that it was, like, rigged, or?
Just because the guy that ran it was Putin. And
was it? Yeah, because, like, there's a certain, like, you can't always trust America when we say an election's rigged. Like, for example, case in point is Bolivia. But, that can be incredibly, you can't always trust what the American State Department says as gospel, that's for sure.
No, I agree.
And that comes with a certain price. So, President Biden recognizes the reality that our continued presence there does not make the U.S. or the world safer. Senator Elizabeth Warren of Massachusetts wrote in a statement, year after year, military leaders told Congress, the American people, that we are finally turning the corner in Afghanistan, but we are only turning in a vicious circle. Honestly, all I got to say on that is, I mean, he's part of the system that put these troops there in the first place, played a big role in supporting both the Iraq and Afghanistan wars and perpetuating them. So I'll believe it when I see it.
Wouldn't you think Afghanistan and the Middle East on the whole is a sideshow compared to China's aggression in Hong Kong, potential aggression in Taiwan, and Russia? I think the superpowers' aggression is much more
Russia is not very
dangerous
powerful
than Afghanistan, which is going to be, in all likelihood, pinprick attacks, kill one, kill two.
China's going to be China what they're setting up to be. I mean, some people disagree on this. Like some people say they want to be the biggest in their region. A lot of people who have an interest, I would argue, to stir up more drama than exactly is needed or is helpful. When it comes to China, say that they're trying to take over the world and be what the United States is right now. And they're, you can see they're already kind of doing that with their Belt Road Initiative.
Yes.
But, I mean, I definitely would say that China can do more than Afghanistan for sure in terms of. But I mean, I don't know. I don't know what would be. I'm not convinced that Xi Jinping, however authoritarian and possibly genocidal, likely genocidal that he is, poses a threat to the lives of Americans, other than the one that's already been dealt in the fact that our elites and Chinese elites sold out jobs in the form of bad trade deals to China. So that's the real blow that China has done, and it's not necessarily just China's fault. A lot of it is some of the biggest political forces in both parties creating that kind of a world. So,
without a doubt.
Yeah, and on that note, we do have to move to a little bit more of a positive story today. For the first time ever, this is in the Daily Poster, for the first time ever, the Democratic Socialists of America is joining forces with major unions on a national campaign. On March 7th, DSA and the Communications Workers of America, as well as the International Union of Painters and Associated Trades, launched efforts with an ambitious goal, getting Congress to pass the Protecting the Right to Organize, or the PRO Act. If signed into law, the legislation would be the most significant labor rights bill since the New Deal era. The DSA making it their number one priority right now, and I personally would love to see this bill passed. It would not go anywhere, obviously, without the filibuster, and I think it's the odds are definitely against it right now, considering the Democratic caucus and the fact that the filibuster is still in place. But over the past month, thousands of volunteers and organizers representing both DSA and unions have made over 500,000 phone calls to voters in key legislators' home states, asking voters to tell their representatives to support the PRO Act. This month, the DSA and union plans on escalating the campaign with in-person rallies and town halls. Personally, I'd say you got to escalate it even more. Whatever it takes, flex those muscles and get into territory. Really, what this is the left, the organized left, getting into territory that it never has been able to go for in a long time. So like, what I say is expand, give it your best shot, and best of luck on this campaign. What's your reaction to this news?
Well, I'm a little bit of two minds on unions generally, but I think your other issue is, should the Dems get rid of the filibuster so they can pass stuff like this? Sort of two distinct issues, and
yeah,
I think one tricky thing that they could do would be, and I'm sure some of your listeners could probably tweet in about this as to whether it's good or not, is take away the filibuster, but before they leave or before the midterms, put it back in.
Yeah, I mean it's
you know what I mean.
It's that simple.
Could you envision doing that? Do you have any sense of if that's even feasible?
I mean, I've not heard anything as to why it wouldn't be. Like, I think it's, yeah, like that seems like the thing. If you want to think in a mind like Mitch McConnell, like that's what would Mitch do? Right? Yeah, that's what he would do. Like that is the definitely the play to make. But really, really cool to see this kind of stuff coming together. When people like me, because there's been a little bit of a fraction, like kind of the Bernie Sanders group of people. People supported him all over different things about what's the best organizing strategy to go forward. A lot of like very frustrated energy kind of dispersing out over all these different places. And what I've kind of always said is we got to go get together, knock on doors, do campaigns and stuff like that. And this seems like a great first step. So the unions, they're able to access DSA's passionate volunteer base, and both sides of the coalition have really enjoyed working together.
Bessemer, though, didn't they?
What?
They took a hit in Bessemer.
Yeah, that was definitely not the right result. But if the PRO Act passes, there can be 1,000 Bessemers. Like that is the real idea, and it's all about using like things like labor strikes and pressuring politicians and getting laws passed kind of in tandem. And what order to put the laws before the organizing before the laws. Because laws can make it easier to organize like this one does. It is a debate that is still to be had. All right, this is kind of the moment that we've all been waiting for. This is a clip here from the West Wing, and Dad, just explain what's your feelings on the West Wing? Why do you like it?
I think the writing is very good. I think their aspirations are good. I think what the leaders aspire to far exceeds what they can grasp, and it just seemed like a realistic depiction of what you would want your leaders to care about.
All right, so this is the clip here I'm about to play. This is Sam Seaborn. He is, I believe, an aide to the president, probably a top aide to the president, right?
Deputy Communications Director.
So he is he's Democrat.
Yes.
So yeah, he's a Democrat, kind of a I would say Bill Clinton style, maybe, in terms of his policies. But he is his big thing is him and Sam Seaborn, played by Rob Lowe, is in a room talking about the Progressive Caucus, talking with the Progressive Caucus, and he's dressing down, a communications aid for someone in the Progressive Caucus. So I'm going to give Dan the headphones here. And, all right.
Henry, last fall, every time your boss got on the stump and said, it's time for the rich to pay their fair share, I hid under a couch and changed my name. I left Gage Whitney making $400,000 a year, which means I paid 27 times the national average in income tax. I paid my fair share, and the fair share of 26 other people. And I'm happy to, because that's the only way it's going to work. And it's in my best interest that everybody be able to go to schools and drive on roads. But I don't get 27 votes on Election Day. The fire department doesn't come to my house 27 times faster, and the water doesn't come out of my faucet 27 times hotter. The top 1% of wage earners of this country pay for 22% of this country. Let's not call them names while they're doing it, is all I'm saying.
Yeah, so there you have it. That is the really kind of a, like, if you want to see Aaron Sorkin in top form, that is definitely what it is. Just in the style of the writing, kind of with the litany of facts, and then the guy at the end just being like, oh well. But yeah, what is your reaction on that clip? Just in general.
I honestly didn't remember that scene, and because I think it's one of the few where the West Wing tilts right.
Yeah,
It's somewhat nickname is the left wing. So the fact that they say something remotely conservative like that is, rare, but Sorkin's attempt at being even-handed, and I 100% agree with the sentiment. I think that's a bad move by Democrats to vilify, because it's the same strategy that Trump uses. It's vilification, and I guess it rallies the troops. People only do it because it works.
yeah.
Unfortunately,
But yeah, like what is if you want to like get a coalition to do something like that, to lower taxes or to raise taxes on the wealthy, like what is the way you do it? Well, it's like, oh, they're very nice, but we just had to tax them a few more percentage points. Like that's not really doesn't really work. And it's also
I
not
think at
really
this juncture,
true.
where especially since the economy has taken such a COVID hit, I think the thing that I would do would be to make it a 2-year tax and say, look, we all got to rally, all hands on deck, we got to right the ship. And I think it would be sort of a bit of, unity in terms of shared sacrifice to say, all right, and he's right. The only people that, the pay taxes, or Mitt Romney had this line, like half the country doesn't pay any taxes.
The moochers, yes, this is a very, very common.
Right. I mean, the numbers are the numbers. I mean, they are what they are. But it
is not entirely, in terms of percentage of income, actually, the people who pay the most taxes are like just before the very rich. Like the most rich actually pay slightly less than that. So that's a little fun fact.
I mean, speaking for myself, if somebody said to me, look, there's been a crisis and everybody's got to pay an additional X, I would be okay with that. And I think businesses would be okay with that. I think companies like Apple and Amazon and people who are using, that's the biggest sort of red herring, is the fact that so many corporations pay far less in tax than the stated rate. So, to get them to put in a minimum tax of 15% or 10% is 100% legitimate and long overdue. The fact that they could pay so little in tax to the country that gave them so much wealth is just mind-boggling. We're getting rooked on that.
Yeah, that kind of stuff. And yeah, what the IRS chief says: $1 trillion in unpaid taxes, and that office doesn't agree with that number. I'm not sure how we got it, but
I think it's just a number to get more. I think it's just a wild guess, and I think it's just a number to get more funding for the IRS.
Yeah, but I think if it is, I mean, it makes sense to me why he would need more funding, because it is not like the IRS the IRS budget's public knowledge. You can see how the taxes and just like the drastic expansion in income inequality, how much the wealthy are raking in. And that goes back to your idea with the idea of like a pandemic windfall tax. It's been proposed in a lot, like
that. Yes.
Bernie had that idea, and it's been, I think, tossed around in various other countries. Maybe I think Britain as well. Corbyn was actually pushing it, but
the problem is that nobody's going to believe that a tax is truly temporary. But if you could convince people that it's really only a 2-year tax, then I think you've got a legitimate winner that would get through. But
and it would probably be smart for like the rich too, because they would be making this big public sacrifice and then be able to go back to business as usual in 2 years.
Yeah, and I think you have a foil for Republicans, because you can say, all right, guys, how would you pay for this situation we're in? We're staring at a debt Armageddon here, where our debt's going to be higher as a percentage of our GDP than it's ever been.
Yeah,
and constantly and increasing. You know, we're sinking fast and going down faster. So
that definitely plays into a concern, and I think it was very funny how like the entire every single provision that helped normal people was temporary, no questions asked, and you better not extend it any longer, possibly more than temporary. But this is obviously like it takes a lot of convincing, and I think like the fact that the corporate tax rate that's going up, but the infrastructure bill is good, and the whole thing obviously with the deficit is one thing. I think the way the rule that John Oliver had was that deficit spending is okay as long as you spend it on something that is productive.
Well, the government has
like
never
infrastructure.
Never won any plaudits for that. So
well, I think that is part of the Reagan dogma that has to die. You know, like there are things that the government can invest in better than anybody else that also pay a lot of dividends throughout the economy.
You know what I don't understand, and AOC brought this up in a testimony at congressional hearing, was like, we don't take any equity for when we give money. Like the government doesn't take any ownership of. Like, if you said, okay, here's $10 million to research a drug, the market would demand 30% ownership of the company. If they took 5%, people would take that deal every which way.
Just the idea of negotiating a prescription drug prices, like that's it's kind of a very similar dynamic there. In terms,
I don't think people fully appreciate how much money is spent researching drugs and the high rate of failure. But to AOC's point, all right, we put up the money, we should get some of the benefits. I think there's no doubt about that. And I think income inequality is the left's winningest issue. You know, everyone can relate to that and see it and say, you know, we got to do something about this.
Yeah, I
what
really
are we going to do? What's your action plan for income inequality? You may not like AOC's, but you got to come up with something better. And if it's not taxation, it's got to be something.
Yeah, that is definitely. It does have to be something, and it's kind of going to be interesting to see how long that kind of problem will be able to like fester under the. I guess you could argue whether it's out or not, but. It is kind of the problem that is underlying behind everything. That seems like a pretty good place to end with an acknowledgement of what's the problems behind everything. Dan, thank you so much for coming on today. Nice, fun conversation to have, and that's all the news flash that we have for today. We will be back on Thursday.